What makes a hero? Many characters in My Hero Academia have different interpretations of that question, different methods of heroism, and different ideologies in general. In the past, I have explored things like Deku's current idea of heroism, but what about his initial inspiration? What is the story of Toshinori Yagi, better known as the symbol of peace, All Might? To the people living and breathing in the world of My Hero Academia, All Might was an untouchable, unstoppable hero. He never faltered, he never showed weakness, and at the end of the day, always saved everyone with a smile. If only that's how things could really work. 40 years ago, during the reign of All for One, society was in a hidden chaos. Even further back than that, the introduction of quirks led to a period of technological stagnation and societal collapse. Amidst the ruins of Japanese society, one man rose up and exploited the masses to obtain immense power and influence. That man was named All for One. He ruled the nation from the shadows, his legacy being mostly rumors on the internet, but society was in poor shape. One day, however, a young quirkless boy met up with a powerful woman. He had only one thing to say to this great hero. What this world lacked was a symbol. A pillar for society to rely on in times of duress. This woman, Nana Shimura, would prove instrumental in the current fate of this world. How could he achieve all this quirkless, however? Luckily for him, Nana Shimura was the wielder of a crystalline network of power, a torch passed down for 7 generations, one for all. He quickly became the 8th inheritor of this immense power, which finally put him into the position of becoming that symbol of peace. In an ironic warning to the future, Toshinori would see the cost of carrying the heavy burden known as One for All, as Nana pushed her family away to keep them safe from All for One before her death. As her student, Toshinori would internalize the lessons he learned from observing her tenure as the 7th holder of One for All, and learned it might be the best to also isolate himself. Becoming the symbol would come at the cost of his own self-love, his self-worth, and his own connections. The only people Toshinori kept close to himself were merely due to necessity or occurred completely by accident. His closeness with Tsukauchi spawned merely by an accidental run-in once, and Night Eye continually pestered him into having him as a sidekick until he finally gave in. Recovery Girl is a close third, and it's safe to say that was probably due to their patient-doctor relationship during his days at UA. Toshinori Yagi had nobody else in his life for those long 4 decades. Eventually, he had finally become what he had sought after, the symbol of peace and pillar of justice, All Might. However, what remained of Toshinori Yagi was slowly becoming more and more stretched thin, as this new persona of his had become his dominant self. He works himself to the bone, never catching a moment's rest. During the underground masquerade arc in the spin-off of My Hero Academia Vigilantes, All Might was stated to work 72 hours non-stop, and was even asking for more from Sir Night Eye before he was forcibly cut off. This intense work ethic pushed onwards for years and years, and as seen with the aftermath of the fight with All for One initially, death wouldn't be enough to have All Might feather the brakes, let alone stop entirely. With a hole in his gut and his organs missing, he still marched forward to save just one more person. Frequently evidenced throughout the series, All Might's existence achieved numerous things. Whatever country he was residing in would experience a sharp decline in crime rates, as demonstrated by the US's crime rate returning to about average after his departure. The symbol of peace's existence also effectively ended organized crime in Japan, causing factions like the Yakuza to hide in the shadows. He also stopped the reign of the incredibly powerful All for One. All Might was a walking crime deterrent who inspired people all around the world with his incredible heroic feats, and his almost never-ending heroism. However, not everything brought in from his ideology and reign as the number one hero was necessarily good. Despite his otherwise best intentions, the previous inspiration I spoke about throughout All Might's tenure led to an overarching issue of complacency within hero society. Not only did the occupation of hero grow to be almost an assumption of somebody's future plans due to the prevalence of them because his existence made the job so easy, if All Might was in the area, the problem was already resolved. If All Might can resolve things in a matter of seconds, what was there to be afraid of? Heroes and civilians alike grew complacent, leading to an issue of bystander effect taking over. The bystander effect is a studied social psychological theory that states that individuals are less likely to offer help to somebody if there are other people present. This theory was presented after a real-world murder of somebody in which 38 people stood by and watched passively. All Might basically supplies this psychological feeling on a wide scale, as heroes grew more and more willing to fall behind in their duties and even heroic mindsets. All Might, in secret, grew weaker and weaker. Nobody knew just how soon this pillar would topple. The idea of a singular pillar for all of society isn't practical or sustainable, so what if he were to fall? All Might vs. All for One marks a massive turning point for the series. The reign of comic book heroism and villainy comes to an end, and to the people of the world, the viewer, and All Might himself, this was it. He was going to die here, until he didn't. Some people still seemed at a loss by Toshinori's survival of this fight, and the point of keeping the mentor alive, and that's something that we'll get into later. With the pillar toppled, All Might was no more, but Toshinori Yagi lived on. He survived, and he was forced to watch the consequences of his ideology, forced to bear witness to the fact that his reign and ideology wasn't practical or sustainable. Heroes weren't used to working together, sitting on their thumbs and growing unprepared and complacent. Picture yourself in the shoes of an average villain. In a world where even All Might could fall, how tough does the average hero seem to you? Left in the wake of his own symbol of peace ideology, powerless to stop the cataclysmic effect of his fall, and left on the sidelines as he watches all of the kids he would once train grow up without him, everything All Might believed in and represented now stands to decay right before Toshinori Yagi's very eyes. His individualistic, self-destructive mindset and tendency to hide the anguish he was going through all come to a boiling point. He couldn't afford to ever seem weak in front of anyone. He was told at a young age that those who are the strongest keep smiling, no matter what. Just like All Might's, Nanoshimura's intentions were not for this phrase to be negatively internalized, but he forced everything behind a smile. He even states this much to Midoriya in Chapter 1. Can you imagine the anguish of watching your life's work, your legacy, crumble before your very eyes? Everything you've built for the past 40 years comes crashing down and there's nothing you could do to stop it. All Might and Sir Night-Eye once had a falling out due to All Might's injury. Night-Eye wanted him to retire to avoid an unspeakably gruesome death, but All Might couldn't sit idly by. He was fully ready to meet his end at the hands of All for One during the Kamino arc, and then we reached the Overhaul arc. Prior to this moment, Toshinori was a man who doesn't at all love himself and who has more or less accepted his death. But yet, he finds a reason to keep on living. To be there for Midoriya's I am here moment. For the first time in a long time, Toshinori isn't alone. However, putting your sole reason for living on somebody else while a touching moment doesn't address the actual underlying problems that he struggles with. Much like his reign as number one, it only serves as a band-aid fix to his deteriorating mental health. Midoriya vows to All Might that he will twist fate and subvert Night-Eye's prediction of his demise. For the first time in Night-Eye's life, somebody smashes the future he had seen, as Midoriya twists fate and defeats Overhaul. Could it be that Toshinori Yagi's fate is not sealed? Near the end of the second act of the series, we see Toshinori struggle with his purpose, moving forward without All Might. He feels frustrated that he can't help them, as the feeling of powerlessness bubbles up inside of him. Aizawa tells him something that he desperately needs to hear, however. Being Toshinori is all he needs to do. As long as he lives and is there for them, that's all the push that they'll need. Flash forward to Act 3, Toshinori is forced to watch just how damaging the self-destructive mindset he held for so long actually is to an outside viewer, and how strong the burden of One for All actually is. Of course, in typical Toshinori fashion, it isn't through himself. He witnesses the failings of All Might firsthand in Midoriya's Dark Deku arc. For the first time, he is the one experiencing this behavior as a third party and seeing the consequences of that isolating mindset. He gets to see how crushing it is, not just for the person involved, but for the people around them as well. Much of Toshinori's development stems directly from the very similar Midoriya Izuku. It is the primary lens that the story uses for not just the viewer, but for Toshinori himself to peer into what is essentially the copy and paste of All Might, and understand exactly what makes himself tick. Unfortunately, this adds even more to his already ever-expanding trauma plate. He feels responsible for Midoriya turning out the way he did in this arc. At this point, you're only getting in the way, All Might, looping back to what was said by Aizawa during the bench scene. Chapter 326 serves as a climax for Toshinori's character arc. It opens with him finding Midoriya's mask, the mask made to imitate All Might's never-ending smile. It now lies, however, broken and chipped on the ground. This isn't just a visual metaphor for Izuku, but for Toshinori himself. The community tends to focus on the villain hunt arc being Midoriya's lowest, and for an understandable reason. However, this arc, and Chapter 326 in particular, is Toshinori Yagi at rock bottom. He confronts what society has become and how he feels responsible for it all. You'll notice how I refer to both All Might and Toshinori Yagi separately, as I feel them to be two entirely different people. This is shown quite strongly by Toshinori approaching the All Might statue in Kamino, as he thinks back to the words of Aizawa. As long as he can be here, that's all the push that they need, yet society sees that All Might isn't here. He even joins in on the public lambasting of All Might by pointing out how he feels he couldn't be there when his disciple was hurting. Suddenly, Stain appears to stop Toshinori from verbally attacking All Might. Also perceiving the difference between the two of them, it had nothing to do with the power of quirks. All Might would maintain that grin and devote every fiber of his being to the people, Stain said. Throughout a garbled mess of communication, Toshinori picks up on these words from Stain. It doesn't fix everything, but it implants the idea in his head that he still has a role to play, and that All Might was never defined by his power, but by his beliefs. Toshinori is by no means fixed, as evidenced by him still blaming himself in the following chapter, also known as the absolute worst thing Horikoshi has ever published, but it perhaps puts him on the right track. Toshinori Yagi can be summarized as a person with self-destructive and isolating tendencies, who grows to have a lack of purpose after losing his powers and watching everything he built for 4 years collapse. This begs the question, what would killing Toshinori do for his arc? If he were to die now, what would the point of all of this suffering be? What would the point of him trying to find a purpose be? For a character who is trying to unlearn toxic behaviors and realize that he is worth more than what he can do, in what way is death a logical ending? If Toshinori was going to die, he would have died during Kamino, but he didn't. He didn't die for a reason. He still has a story to tell, and it would make the concept of twisting fate introduced in the Overhaul arc entirely for naught. I vehemently disagree with the assertions that All Might's survival would be terrible writing. I think what's going on now is fantastic. All for One once stated, "You chose the wrong moment to bow out. you missed your chance to die. Toshinori Yagi is a story about a man who had it all, and had lost nearly everything trying to find a path forward through the darkness. A man trying to improve his mental health and learn not every burden is his to bear. Death is not an answer to his arc. Thank you so much for watching this quick little analysis on All Might and why I think All Might should live. If you like this video, please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe, just for the funny YouTube algorithm. Also, you can go down in the description, you can follow me on Twitter, where I'm always correct, never been ratioed once ever, and down below is also my Discord, where we talk about My Hero Academia, ReZero, Jujutsu Kaisen, and stuff like that. Thanks for watching. See ya.